The snow had been falling steadily for 3 hours now, transforming the busy downtown street into a hushed, white, draped corridor. Maya stood perfectly still on the sidewalk outside the gleaming glass tower that housed Bennett and Associates, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her thin blazer doing almost nothing against the biting January wind. Her lips had gone from pink to pale to an alarming shade of blue, and she'd lost feeling in her toes 20 minutes ago. She wasn't supposed to be wearing a coat. That had been made explicitly clear. If you're going to act like you don't respect this company's time, Gerald Mitchum had said, his voice cold and precise as a scalpel, then you can stand outside and think about whether you want to continue working here at all. He gestured toward the door with one manicured hand. Without your coat. I want you to really feel what it means to be left out in the cold. The offense had been small, or at least Maya thought so. She'd been 2 minutes late to the morning meeting. 2 minutes, because the subway had stalled between stations, because the woman next to her had fainted and Maya had stayed to make sure she was breathing, because sometimes life happened in ways that couldn't be controlled or predicted. But Gerald didn't care about explanations. He never had. For 6 months, Maya had endured his particular brand of cruelty. The public humiliations in front of clients, the impossible deadlines followed by scathing criticism when she failed to meet them, the way he'd take credit for her ideas in presentations and then reprimand her for not contributing enough. She'd stayed because she needed the job, because the rent in the city was astronomical, because her mother's medical bills kept climbing, because finding another position in her field wasn't as simple as people pretended it was. So she stood in the snow and tried not to cry, because crying would only give Gerald more ammunition. People passed by in their heavy winter coats, their scarves wrapped snug around their necks, their gloved hands clutching coffee cups that released steam into the frigid air. A few glanced at her with concern. One woman paused, started to approach, but Maya shook her head quickly. The last thing she needed was for someone to make a scene that would get back to Gerald. He'd find a way to blame her for causing a disturbance. Through the glass walls of the building's lobby, she could see the security guard at his desk, old Morris with his kind eyes and gentle smile. He kept looking at her, his expression troubled, but he didn't come outside. Maya didn't blame him. Everyone who worked in this building knew better than to cross Gerald Mitchum. He was a senior partner, untouchable, the man who brought in their biggest clients and made everyone else's careers possible. Or so the story went. The cold was starting to feel almost warm now, which Maya knew was a very bad sign. She'd read about hypothermia, about how the body started to shut down, about how people in the final stages often felt hot and would strip off their remaining clothes. She wasn't there yet, but her thoughts were getting fuzzy around the edges, her focus drifting like the snowflakes that continued their relentless descent from the gray sky above. She wondered what her mother would think if she could see her now. Probably that Maya should quit, should walk away from any job that treated her like this, should value herself more than a paycheck. But her mother had always been braver than Maya, had always stood up for herself even when it cost her. That's probably why she'd spent her career as a teacher in underfunded schools, instead of climbing any sort of corporate ladder. That's probably why she'd never understood Maya's tolerance for injustice in the name of practicality. The door to the building opened, and Maya's heart sank. She expected to see Gerald, coming to check if she'd learned her lesson yet, ready to deliver another cutting remark. Instead, a man she'd never seen before emerged into the snow. He was tall, maybe in his late 40s, with silver threading through his dark hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore an expensive wool coat and carried a leather briefcase, but he stopped the moment he saw her. For a long moment, he just stared, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion to something that might have been anger, though not directed at her. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice deep and carrying despite the muffling effect of the snow. Maya's teeth were chattering so hard she could barely speak. "I work here," she managed. "That's not what I asked." He stepped closer, studying her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "You're freezing. You're not wearing a coat. Why are you standing outside in a snowstorm?" She wanted to lie, to protect herself, to avoid making waves. But something about the genuine concern in his eyes, the way he was looking at her like she was a person who mattered, broke through her carefully constructed defenses. "My boss sent me out here," she said quietly, "as punishment." The man's jaw tightened. "Your boss sent you outside in January, during a snowstorm, without proper clothing, as punishment?" When he said it like that, it sounded even worse than it felt. Maya nodded. "What's your boss's name?" She hesitated. This could make everything so much worse. But she was so cold, so tired, so utterly done with pretending any of this was normal or acceptable. "Gerald Mitchum." Something flickered across the man's face, recognition and disgust in equal measure. "How long have you been out here?" "Almost an hour." He swore under his breath, a sharp word that the wind caught and carried away. Then he was shrugging out of his coat, draping it over her shoulders before she could protest. The warmth of it was shocking, almost painful against her frozen skin. "Come with me," he said, and there was steel in his voice now, the kind of authority that expected to be obeyed. "I can't," Maya whispered. "He'll fire me." "He's not going to fire you." The man pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then looked back at her. "I'm David Bennett. I own this company, and Gerald Mitchum is about to have a very unpleasant conversation." The world seemed to tilt slightly. David Bennett, the Bennett of Bennett and Associates. She'd never met him, had only seen him in company photos, had heard him spoken of in reverent tones by everyone except Gerald, who seemed to resent the man whose name was on the building. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said weakly. "You're not causing trouble. You're standing outside freezing because someone abused their power. That's on him, not you." David put a hand gently on her elbow, guiding her toward the door. "Please, let's get you inside before you get frostbite." Morris looked up in alarm as they entered the lobby, warm air washing over Maya like a blessing. "Mr. Bennett, sir, I wanted to help her, but Mr. Mitchum said—" "It's all right, Morris," David said, his voice gentle now. "Can you get us some hot coffee? And maybe call down to medical, have them come check her out." "Right away, sir." David led Maya to a seating area near the lobby's fireplace, easing her into a chair close to the flames. She was shaking violently now, the warmth bringing all her nerve endings back to painful life. He sat across from her, his expression grave. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maya Torres." "How long have you worked here, Maya?" 6 months. I'm a junior analyst in corporate strategy." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already suspected. "And how long has Gerald been treating you like this?" "Like what?" She knew it was a stupid question even as she asked it. "Like someone whose dignity doesn't matter. Like someone who deserves to be punished and humiliated." The tears she'd been holding back for an hour finally spilled over. "The whole time, but I need this job. My mother is sick, and the insurance here is good, and I can't just—" "You don't have to explain yourself," David said quietly. "None of this is your fault." Morris returned with 2 steaming cups of coffee. Maya wrapped her hands around one, feeling the heat seep slowly back into her fingers. David pulled out his phone again, made a call. "Linda, I need you to pull Maya Torres's employment file. Also, I want a list of everyone currently on Gerald Mitchum's team and anyone who's left in the past 2 years. He paused, listening. I'm in the lobby. Send Gerald down immediately. Tell him it's not optional. Another pause. No, don't tell him why. Just get him down here. He ended the call and looked at Maya. I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm sorry it took me this long to find out. I've been working from our London office for the past 8 months, dealing with an acquisition. Clearly, I should have been paying better attention to what was happening in my own building. It's not your responsibility to. Actually, it is. I built this company on the principle that talent matters more than ego, that people do their best work when they're respected and supported. Gerald was supposed to embody those values. Obviously, he doesn't. A medical assistant arrived and checked Maya's temperature, her fingers and toes, her overall condition. Mild hypothermia, the woman said, but she'd be fine with rest and warmth. She wrapped a heated blanket around Maya's shoulders and told her to keep drinking warm liquids. Then Gerald appeared, striding across the lobby with his characteristic confidence, his expensive suit immaculate, his expression arranged in practiced professional warmth. He didn't notice Maya at first, his attention focused entirely on David. David, welcome back. I didn't realize you were in today. Linda said it was urgent. Sit down, Gerald. Something in David's tone made Gerald's smile falter. His gaze finally slid to Maya, and his face went very still. I see you've met Maya, he said carefully, one of our junior analysts. One of your junior analysts, David corrected. The one you sent outside to stand in a snowstorm for an hour, without a coat, as punishment for being 2 minutes late to a meeting. Gerald's expression didn't change, but Maya could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Maya was. I'm going to stop you right there, David said, his voice deadly quiet now, because I've already heard what happened from Maya, and unless you're about to tell me she's lying, which would require me to believe that she stood outside freezing for an hour voluntarily and then made up an elaborate story about why, I suggest you don't make this worse. She was late, Gerald said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his voice. Repeatedly late. It's a pattern of disrespect. According to her file, which I just had pulled, she's been late exactly twice in 6 months. Once when the subway system had a major delay that affected thousands of commuters, and today, when she stopped to help someone who'd fainted. That's not a pattern. That's being a human being in a city where things happen. Gerald's jaw clenched. With all due respect, David, how I manage my team is my business. These young people need to learn that actions have consequences, that the business world requires discipline. The business world requires results, David interrupted. And abuse is not discipline. Humiliation is not management. Forcing someone to stand outside in dangerous cold without proper clothing isn't teaching a lesson. It's sadism dressed up as professionalism. I think you're overreacting. I'm really not. David leaned forward. Tell me, Gerald, how many people have left your team in the past 2 years? Gerald hesitated. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. 17, David said. 17 people have quit or transferred out of your department in 2 years. That's an 85% turnover rate. Do you know what the turnover rate is in the rest of the company? Silence. 12%. David continued. Which means either you're the unluckiest manager in history, constantly being assigned terrible employees, or you're the problem. Care to guess which one I think it is? Those people couldn't handle the pressure, Gerald said, his voice tight now. This is a demanding field. Not everyone is cut out for. Maya has the highest performance ratings of any junior analyst we've hired in the past 3 years, David said. Her strategy proposals have been incorporated into presentations for 3 of our top 5 clients. Her analysis on the Brenner acquisition saved us from what would have been a very expensive mistake, and yet somehow, despite being brilliant at her job, she's been standing outside freezing because you decided being 2 minutes late was grounds for torture. Maya stared at David in shock. She'd had no idea anyone had noticed her work, let alone that it had been valued. Gerald had certainly never mentioned it. He'd never mentioned anything positive at all. Gerald's face had gone red. I have brought more revenue into this firm than anyone else. My client relationships are important, David agreed, but not important enough to justify creating a hostile work environment. Not important enough to excuse abuse. And definitely not important enough to risk the kind of lawsuit Maya would be absolutely justified in filing right now. The word lawsuit hung in the air like a sword. I want you to clean out your office, David said quietly. You're done here. You can't fire me, Gerald sputtered. I'm a named partner. My contract. Your contract has a morality clause that allows for termination if you engage in conduct detrimental to the company's reputation and values. I'd say forcing employees to risk hypothermia qualifies. My lawyers will be in touch regarding the terms of your exit. You have until end of business today to remove your personal belongings. Security will escort you. Gerald stood up, his face twisted with rage. This is ridiculous. Over one incident, one soft little girl who can't handle real pressure, you're throwing away everything I've built here. One incident. David's voice was sharp now. Maya, how many times has Gerald humiliated you in front of others, taken credit for your work, or punished you for things outside your control? Maya swallowed hard. I stopped counting. David looked at Gerald. Get out of my building. For a moment, it seemed like Gerald might argue further, might try to salvage the situation. Then he turned and stalked toward the elevators, his spine rigid with fury. Morris picked up his phone, presumably calling additional security to monitor Gerald's exit. When he was gone, David turned back to Maya. Are you all right? She nodded, though truthfully, she was overwhelmed, processing everything that had just happened. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I'm just sorry it took so long for someone to intervene. He paused. I want you to take the rest of the week off, paid. Give yourself time to recover, both physically and mentally. When you come back, we'll discuss your future here. I'd like to move you out of that department entirely, maybe into a direct strategy role where your talents can be better utilized. You don't have to do that, Maya said quietly. I'm not doing it out of pity. I'm doing it because you're good at your job and you deserve to work in an environment where that's recognized. He stood up. Also, I'm going to be conducting a full review of management practices across the company. If there are others like Gerald, I want to know about it. Would you be willing to speak with HR about your experiences? Maya thought about the others on Gerald's team, about Jennifer who'd cried in the bathroom after he'd called her stupid in front of a client, about Marcus who'd started having panic attacks before meetings, about all the talented people who'd left because they couldn't take it anymore. Yes, she said. I'll talk to them. David smiled, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger and less severe. Thank you, and Maya, take my coat. You can return it next week. She walked out of the building an hour later, wrapped in David Bennett's expensive wool coat, a hot chocolate from the building's cafe warming her hands. The snow had stopped, and the late afternoon sun was breaking through the clouds, painting everything gold and white and beautiful. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. How was work, sweetheart? Maya looked up at the building, at the windows reflecting the winter sky, at the place where she'd stood frozen and humiliated, where everything had changed because one person had asked a simple question and actually listened to the answer. She typed back, It was a good day, actually. I think things are going to be better now. As she walked toward the subway, she felt lighter than she had in months. Not because someone had rescued her, though David's intervention had been necessary and important, but because she'd finally told the truth about what was happening, had finally stopped protecting someone who'd been hurting her, had finally believed that maybe, just maybe, she deserved better than what she'd been accepting. The city was beautiful in the snow, she thought, and tomorrow, spring would be one day closer. And she would still have her job, still have her insurance, still be able to take care of her mother. But she would also have her dignity back, would work in a place where her contributions mattered, where being 2 minutes late didn't mean being left out in the cold. She would have a future where she didn't have to choose between surviving and being treated like a human being. And that, Maya decided as she descended into the warmth of the subway station, was worth more than any paycheck. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.